Indian artifacts found at the St. Albans archaeological site along the Kanawha River shows that these Native Americans lived here in 7,900 BC. This site is one of the oldest recorded sites in North America. It has been said that this area is one of the oldest continuously inhabited areas in the United States. There were once several Adena mounds located in St. Albans, with the last remaining one located in the Tays Hills Cemetery. After the mound builders left this area, several Indian tribes lived and hunted here. The Kanawha Indians told of the beautiful river that flowed through here, now called the Kanawha River from their name. Also, the Monotons, Senecas, and Shawnees hunted here. They often caused trouble for the early white settlers in this area. The first white man to have traveled this area was John Peter Sally in 1742, when he and a few others traveled down the Coal River in buffalo skin canoes, also called bull boats. These explorers named it Coal River because of the vast outcroppings of coal found. Their travels eventually ended in New Orleans. It is also thought that Mary Ingalls traveled through here during her escape from the Shawnees in 1755. The first permanent white settlers to this area were the Tacketts, who built Fort Tackett in 1789. This was the furthest westward settlement in Virginia during this time. Fort Tackett was located at the present site of 84 Lumber Company. Everything west of the Appalachian Mountains was considered wilderness. Indians attacked the fort 2 separate times in 1790, and captives were taken as far away as Michigan. 5 residents escaped their captors and eventually made it back to their families at Coal's Mouth. During the second attack, the fort was completely burnt by the attackers, and it was almost 20 years until white settlers again ventured into this area. George Washington originally owned the land where St. Albans is now located. It was granted to him for his military service during the French and Indian Wars. His niece, Elizabeth Spotswood, inherited this land after Washington's death in 1799. All of the land on the west side of the Coal River was owned by Thomas Tays, who owned the land all the way to Tays Valley. The only road at that time was the existing Buffalo and Indian trails. These trails became the James River and Kanawha Turnpike in 1831 and ran from Richmond, Virginia to the Kentucky border. Stephen Tays acquired his father's land and later built a stagecoach inn and a covered toll bridge across Coal River along the James River and Kanawha Turnpike in 1832. This was the only route in this area to the Ohio River at this time. Colonel John Lewis owned land on the west side of Coal River where Fort Tackett was located. He built a large brick mansion there in 1820, and it was called Vauquelin. One half of Washington's land was later purchased by Philip R. Thompson, and the rest was purchased by Morris Hudson. Samuel Hudson, son of Morris Hudson, built a fine house along the Turnpike Early Road in 1818. He called it Rosedale, and it is the oldest house existing in St. Albans. The Hudson family built the first church west of Charleston, which was then called Fort Lee. This church was named Bangor Parish, and it was located where the Bangor Cemetery is now located, across the street from the old Highland Elementary School. This church burnt in 1845, and the present St. Mark's Episcopal Church was built to take its place in 1847 along the Coal River.
During the Civil War, this place became a triage center for the Confederate Army, especially at the time of the Battle of Scary Creek And then I find it very interesting, especially in the light of modern and current history, that this became a place where a truce was held every Sunday. And soldiers from both the North and the South would gather in this building for prayer. And then they would continue the hostilities at midnight. After the Battle of Scary Creek, the Union took this location and then gutted the building, unfortunately, and used it for a stable. Another feature is the beautiful lectern that you'll see in here. That was one of the few items that was saved from the fire in 1845. That lectern was in the old church and is at least 175 years old now. And it's a hand-carved piece of, it's a kind of a rudimentary piece of carving. It's a beautiful piece that has been preserved in the oldest Bible that we know of in the valley. It was also saved as the fire broke out. And of course, the other thing, of course, the bell that rolled down the hill that tragic day is still in the belfry of this church and has been ringing out the praises of God and summoning people to worship for over 175 years. And so that's St. Mark's Church.
Philip Thompson owned much of Colesmouth in the early 1800s, and he laid out a few lots and some dirt streets. Only a few dozen families lived here at this time, wilderness area, in the 1830s and to 1850s. Although known by most people as Colesmouth, Mr. Thompson called his town Philippi. John Cunningham purchased land beside Thompson and also laid out streets and lots shortly before the Civil War, and he named his town Jefferson. Both towns were combined in 1868 and incorporated as the village of Kanawha City. And finally, St. Albans in the year 1872. Several houses built before the Civil War are still standing in town, besides Rosedale. There is the Chilton House, Ravenswood, and the Turner House. Colesmouth was mostly a southern town at the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861. Many local soldiers joined the Confederacy just in time to fight in one of the early Civil War battles at Scary Creek. The Valcoloon Mansion and property was used by the Confederates as their headquarters by Captain George S. Patton and Colonel Tompkins. Morgan's Log Plantation Kitchen was located in Putnam County during the Battle of Scary Creek and was used as a hospital and also used to feed Union soldiers. It was moved to St. Albans in 1972 as a gift from Sid Morgan. The Union soldiers won the Battle of Scary Creek and occupied the town of St. Albans during the war. The retreating Confederates burnt the covered bridge across the Coal River after the Battle of Scary Creek and sank several coal barges. The Union soldiers used St. Mark's Episcopal Church as a stable. With the discovery of coal in Boone County in the late 1850s, a series of locks and dams were built on Coal River from Colesmouth to Peytona in 1855. Cannel coal was shipped by steamboat to Cincinnati, where the greasy coal was refined to make fuel oil for the lamps.
I'm Dr. Bill Dean, and I've been asked to relate a few things about the history of the Coal River and St. Albans industry. Between 1854 and 56 or 7, 8 locks and dams were built on the Coal River to Peytona, named for William Madison Peyton. One lock was built on Little Coal River, Lock A. They were numbered 1 through 8, starting in St. Albans. The first lock was about a mile above the mouth. There's very little trace of the navigation system left, some here and there if you know where to look. Now, why did they go up the river? They wanted cannel coal. Cannel coal is a corruption of candle coal, and it burns with a bright flame like a candle, a bright blue flame, and you can extract coal oil from it. Cannel coal replaced whale oil, and I think it was the halfway house between whale oil and petroleum or kerosene that we still call coal oil. But the true coal oil is cannel coal oil. The locks were set to open in 1857, and they were waiting for high water, and they really got it. In early December, the whole system was really torn up. One Charleston newspaper said that, well, they don't think the damage to the locks and dams was too great, and in the next sentence they said the gristmill at Laurel Falls was washed away. So in March of 1859, the first steamboat went up the river. Took 10 barges upstream all the way through all 8 locks to Potomac. From there on, steamboat traffic was regular on the river until the Civil War.
Passengers and the mail and produce also traveled the packet boats daily. Although the Coal River could be traveled nearly 30 miles upstream, the Kanawha River could only be traveled by those boats during seasonal times of high water. A record flood in 1861 nearly wiped out these stone and log dams. Today, only one complete dam remains at Tornado. It was rebuilt to operate a grist mill. Lock number 1 is now underwater, but the nearby lockmaster's house still remains in town nearby. Along with the population growth and prosperity of the town following the Civil War, education became a major concern. The town hall was used at first as a school in 1872. It was often called Swamp College due to the backwaters nearby. During those times, most students only went to the 8th grade. Also in 1872, Shelton College was complete on what is now called College Hill. Initially called Coles Mouth High School, it was renamed Shelton College due to the sizable contribution by Mr. T.M. Shelton. Shelton College struggled financially until finally closing in 1906 after being called for a while St. Albans Latin School. This huge 3-story brick building remained abandoned and unused until Dr. Russell Hamrick restored this into a fine home in the 1940s. The Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad reached St. Albans in 1873. The railroad was built by railroad builder Collis P. Huntington. Huntington's nephew, Edward, supervised the building of the railroad and their sawmill here. Edward built a fine home in town in 1873, which is now the home of the St. Albans Woman's Club. The railroad helped to get the lumber to market much better than the seasonal log floats down the river. A railroad did not go up Coal River to haul logs or coal until 1906. Logs were still floated to the sawmills down the Coal River. The C&O depot and freight warehouse was built in 1906. A separate railroad station was built for the Coal River Railroad. This depot is now a home on 8th Avenue. River travel was another popular means to travel and transport goods before 1900. The Kanawha River had locks and dams finally built in the 1880s. Steamboats made regular stops at St. Albans from Cincinnati. A wharf used to be located at the end of B Street for unloading passengers and freight. Steamboats also ran up Coal River until the early 1880s, when the locks finally fell in disrepair due to numerous floods.
When it was decided that a lock and dam system that could take steam tugs up the river with empty barges and return them, it was decided to build a crib series of dams. What they are is just big square boxes, about 15 feet square, placed on the bottom of the river, on the bedrock, clear across the river. And some were put behind them and more behind them. And each step up, there'd be one less box of cribs. And finally, the last one on top, by 1867, had it back in operation. And it operated until sometime in 1881, as far as we can tell. So St. Albans had navigation on the Coal River for a period of about 30 years. As far as we know, navigation ended in 1881. That's when the coal companies jerked the support out from the lock and dam system because they themselves shut down and went out of business because cannel coal was no longer profitable to mine and sell. But the river was still used. It'll be used more than ever to float logs down.
In the 1880s, lumber became the primary industry in town. Nearly 500 people now lived in St. Albans. Giant logs, some reportedly 9 feet in diameter, were cut upriver and floated down the Coal River to St. Albans for cutting in the many sawmills. In order to tie up the logs until needed by the mills, log booms filled with rocks were built in the river. These worked well, but in 1888, during a major flood, an estimated 100,000 logs broke loose and floated to the Ohio River.
In 1888, the Bowman Lumber Company became an organization that came here. They had operated in Pennsylvania, and we're used to rivers. The Susquehanna is a mile wide, and they floated logs down that thing in places. And so Coal River wasn't much of a problem, they thought. So they tried to boom the whole river to catch logs at their mill, which was near lock number 1, about a mile above the mouth of the river, up Pennsylvania Avenue today. So a flood occurred in 1888, and it washed possibly 100,000 logs way down the river. They had to pay to get them back, what they did get back. So they knew that Coal River looks tame, but it can rise 12 feet in as many hours. So it's a fast rising river. The Bowman Lumber Company, after they decided to boom one half the river, spent about $50,000 backing the people from Virginia who had formed the Coal River Boom and Driving Company. So the Bowman Company became part of the owners of that company and put in a series of crib structures. They put in a series above the lower falls and a series below the lower falls. The ones above the lower falls can still be seen. There's 25 of them. They're those little islands you've wondered what they're all about. Well, they're man-made, and they were open on top and filled with rocks. And they were built out of logs. And the upper sides were smooth, so the logs could pass over them easily. Then between them were strings of poplar logs. And they could only bring out poplar because it's the only hardwood that's light enough to float. So that restricted the Coal River's output, but there was plenty of poplar to cut. One tree was 9 feet in diameter and 27 feet around. So that shows you what first growth timber was like in West Virginia. Once the logs were driven downriver and given to their individual owners, they built them into rafts, log rafts. They weren't very sturdy. They didn't have to be because they were just being towed a mile or 2 miles to mills. The Bowmans took their logs there, so they didn't have to do that. and the 3 or 4 other sawmills would get their logs this way. One company, though, built sturdy rafts. It was Cole and Crane in Cincinnati, and they built humongous rafts. They would build them as long as football fields. And they would build a cook building and a sleeping building. And they would have the provisions to man that raft for several men to take it clear to Cincinnati. And they logged up Coal River also. The string boom system, which was mainly controlled by the Bowmans, operated until 1905. In that year, the railroad was completed up Coal River far enough they could bring the logs out. And that increased what could be brought out. They could bring out oak, they could bring out cherry, they could bring out walnut, pine, anything they wanted then by the railroad. So the lumber business built St. Albans. It's the industry that really did build St. Albans. But St. Albans industry is a little different in its development. Normally in West Virginia and in the timbering states, the timbering occurred first and then it was replaced by coal development. In St. Albans and on Coal River, it was not that way. The first people were drawn in because of the coal, and then we went to timber, then we're back to coal. But coal is what started it.
The years 1885 to 1910 were the boom years of St. Albans. The railroad and the James River and Kanawha Turnpike both passed through town. Main Street was thriving, and a dozen lumber companies and sawmills provided plenty of jobs. The largest and longest operating sawmill was the Bowman Lumber Company. The lumber companies built several large homes in town for their superintendents or owners. In all, there were a dozen lumber companies and sawmills at the beginning of 1900, and times were good. With the lumber boom came numerous general stores and several businesses for the many workers here. Main Street consisted of a dirt street and board sidewalks in the early 1900s, much like an Old West town. Often cattle and pig drives would go right down Main Street. Main Street suffered 2 separate fires in 1906 that destroyed most of downtown. Having no fire department, they delivered a firefighting wagon from Charleston by train. Of course, by the time it arrived and was unloaded, it was too late. The very next year after the fires, a volunteer fire department was formed. The first fire department and City Hall were located where the First Baptist Church now stands. A new city ordinance required all new buildings on Main Street to be of stone or masonry after the fires. After Main Street was rebuilt after the fire of 1906, it boasted 2 banks, 30 mercantile or grocery stores, a hardware store, 2 hotels, the Colonial and the Majestic, 2 train depots, a theater, 4 doctors, a funeral home, a photographer, several drugstores, a telegraph office, a newspaper, and a hospital. A permanent fire department was finally established along with the police department. The railroad also had a train repair shop. The dirt streets in town eventually gave way to brick streets and concrete sidewalks. The old James River and Kanawha Turnpike, which went through Main Street, later became known as the Midland Trail and later U.S. Route 60. This road carried hundreds of travelers from Virginia to the new frontier in Ohio and beyond. The 1910 census gave St. Albans as 1,200 people. Transportation in the 1830 to Coles Mouth was by horseback, stagecoach, or horse and buggy. The rivers were too shallow for large boats, with many hazardous shoals except for the navigable Coal River. Transportation changed at the turn of the 1900s. Horses gave way to automobiles. Trains, and steamboats. Streetcars reached St. Albans in 1903 from Charleston. A ferry operated across Kanawha River and was eventually replaced with a toll bridge in 1934. The present St. Albans Bridge was built in 1934 and was initially a toll bridge. The toll for the ferry was actually cheaper than the toll bridge, and the ferry continued to operate until about 1940. Many fine homes were built in town between 1900 and 1920 by the lumber companies for their owners and sawmill superintendents. Many are located along 8th Avenue. The William Moeller House is one of the finest examples of Queen Anne style in the area. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. All of these houses were constructed with finest hardwoods and materials and are still in excellent condition today. Hundreds of local residents served in World War I. The National Guard Unit, Company B of 150th Infantry, was formed in 1921 in St. Albans. The unit was made up mostly of men that had returned from military services in World War I. The armory was built shortly after the unit was formed, and it still stands today at the corner of 6th Avenue and 3rd Street. With the boom years came population growth and the need for newer and larger schools. The Coles Mouth High School that doubled as City Hall was not adequate. Normally, a student attended school only to the 8th grade. Shelton College then served students beyond the 8th grade. Central School was built in 1901 and was located downtown at the end of Main Street across the street from the library. Students could now attend through the 12th grade. West of St. Albans, students attended Fairview Elementary. Students at the eastern part of town went to Hansford Elementary, Highland Elementary, and Parkway Elementary in Ordnance Park. A new high school was built in 1924, and later it was used as a junior high school. At one time, black and white students attended separate schools. Black students would attend the Carter G. Woodson School on Pennsylvania Avenue, now the American Legion building. A new school was built for these students in 1933 and was first called Stop 16 School because of the streetcar stop there. In 1940, the name was changed to the Carter G. Woodson School, and now known as McKinley. 9th to 12th grade, black students attended high school in Charleston at Garnet High until 1955. Sport teams in schools were as popular in the early 1900s as they are now. Everything from football to baseball, basketball, and even the girls had a team. Colesmouth, later called St. Albans, had several post offices over the years, beginning with the Stagecoach Inn, and moving eventually to the First National Bank and finally into its own building in 1938 on 6th Avenue. This building is listed on the National Register. And although St. Albans had 5 different town names, Colesmouth, Philippi, Jefferson, Village of Kanawha City, and then St. Albans, the post office has had only 2, Colesmouth and St. Albans. St. Albans has always been a town of many churches. The first church in town was Bangor Parish, which burnt in 1845 and was located along the James River and Kanawha Turnpike. The church is gone, but the Bangor Cemetery is still there, and many of our early pioneers are buried there. That church was replaced with the present St. Mark's Episcopal Church in 1847 along the Coal River. The first Presbyterian church was originally a wooden church building that was moved, and the present stone church built in 1910. The bell from the old church is in the present church bell tower. The old wooden church was eventually moved to 6th Avenue and used for several years by the Methodist Episcopal Church. The First Baptist Church had its start before the Civil War. A fine brick church was built on 2nd Street in 1909, and the present church building built across the street from the old one in 1928. St. Francis Catholic Church looked different then, as did the Church of Christ on Washington Street. St. Paul's Baptist Church was originally built in 1872 on Pennsylvania Avenue for the black residents in town. The present church building on 8th Avenue was built in 1921, and the lovely brass doors are the works of the local artist Hubert Smith. The First Baptist, St. Mark's Episcopal, and St. Paul's Baptist are all listed in the National Register of Historic Places. The people of St. Albans had plenty to occupy their time in its heyday for young and old alike. Fraternal groups or clubs and lodges like the Masonic Lodge were quite active. The Masonic Lodge building, or Washington Lodge, was built in 1926. Other early groups that still exist today are the American Legion, the Rotary, and the Lions Clubs, Eastern Star, Delphian Club, and the Woman's Club. Parades were popular on Main Street with the flag corps, buggies, and bands. Main Street's first movie theater was the Isis Theater, used not only for movies, but also local and traveling plays and singers. Later renamed the Real Theater, it burnt down in 1930, and later the Albans Theater was built nearby. Scouting was also popular with boys and girls. They were often sponsored by the local churches. Boy Scouting started in St. Albans in 1910. The same year it was organized in America. One of the most popular summer activities was swimming at the Lower Falls Beach on Coal River. With a natural sand beach and a bathhouse, this was the place to be in the summertime. St. Albans has changed over the years, but it is still the place to be.